So today I'm going to focus on desire, and mostly this whole dynamic that we take from desire and how it gets from being something that is invisible to something that's visible. With that sort of intentional but non-intentional, it's also going to be in Ephesians. This will be 4:17. This is right where Jeff left off. I'm just going to go ahead and turn there, read it, and we'll dissect from there. So in Ephesians 4, which I don't have my glasses, so forgive my slowness here, or stuttering, or whatever I might do. So this I say, and affirm together with the Lord, that you walk no longer just as the Gentiles also walk, in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart. And they, having become callous, have given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. Now let's just stop right there. Okay, so there's this dynamic. And in this dynamic, we start with hardness of heart. You're hearing things of giving themselves over to the practice of every type of impurity. We also have this idea of being darkened in understanding. So here's my dynamic. The first in this will be desire itself. From desire comes the intellectual understanding. In this case, I'm going to put belief. So you have the desire, and your desire fuels what you think, what you believe. And then from belief, out comes the results. In this case, I'm putting action. This is what you're doing. This is what you do. And it all stems from what you think, which stems from really what you feel. Those inner cravings that you cannot just see readily. Now, with this verse, or passage that I read, there's a few things that came up. So one, no longer walk as the Gentiles walk. That's here in action. No walk. Okay? You also had, in that same category, the practicing of every kind of impurity. Practice. These are the actions. These are the end results. Now, where's the thought life coming in? We have darkened understanding. The understanding was darkened. What was the other one? The futility of thoughts. And desire. The hardened heart. And what was the other one? Oh, deceitful desires. The heart is deceitful above all things. Who can know it? So in this case, with the rest of the passage, I think, okay, so, but you did not learn Christ this way. If indeed you learned Christ, if indeed you have heard him and have been taught in him, just as truth is in Jesus, that in reference to your former manner of life, that you lay aside the old self, which is being corrupted in accordance with the lust of deceit, and that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and put on the new self, which is in the likeness of God, has been created in the righteousness and holiness of truth. Now, I know Jeff's probably going to do his own thing with that passage. I'm just focusing on the desire dynamic, and we'll see how well we match. Okay, so there are these components, and I broke it down to these different segments. And what I would like you to walk away from is the idea that when you do something, well, one, it didn't just come out of the blue, but also as we go to the end of this, hoping that the idea of what morality is and how it fits in our perspective, and how it's not just something that we do as something like a law where it's a should not, do not. Okay, so on that note, James 4. In James 4, he writes, "What is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? Is it not the source, your pleasures, that wage war in your members? You lust and do not have, so you commit murder. You are envious and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask with the wrong motives, so that you may spend it on your pleasure. You adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility with God?" So, relating that to what I've just put on the board, he says, where do the wars and conflicts come from? Well, that's the action. It comes from your desires. And draw another piece for you, if I can find an appropriate spot for this. So as a person, we have multiple desires. Each one of these represent something, whether it's tangible or intangible. These are things that we pursue after. These are things that we want. And so when we get to, for example, James 4, and it says we end up basically with this action of evil, it stems from us wanting something. Now, if anyone threatens our desires, so this connection between what we want and ourselves is being threatened, that's where we resort to these tactics. It could be depression, that acknowledgement that you're just not going to get what you want. It could be that anger. Again, it could be that you're not getting what you want, or maybe you're being more bullheaded and trying to get what you want. Whatever it is, you're fighting for it, something. They're doing something as long as you feel like there's a threat to yourself and what you want. Interestingly enough with James, he's also saying that you want, you don't have, you asked for it, but you didn't receive because you wanted to spend it back on your own greed. So when you bring in God into this picture, I won't worry about it. So when you bring God into this picture, it's not that you're trying to bring yourself to God necessarily, it's bring God to yourself, and He's going to be the one who helps you get what you want. You're this constant craving to gain things for self-pleasure, and God's going to be some means of helping you get that. So we turn to Romans 1. I won't read it, but Romans 1, especially as you get to verses 18 through 23, you have Paul, he's writing that there's God, and He created everything, and even though everything's manifested to people, people are not thankful. They're not giving Him that glory He deserves. Why do you think right there? Because right after that, he starts getting to a spew of mannerisms of everything people indulge in afterwards. Examples of things of God giving them over to all these lusts that they craved. But the first thing he mentions was unthankfulness. I didn't write it in this list, but I could almost put dissatisfaction, here would be dissatisfaction. Here it would be in the form of complaining. And the interesting thing is, when we take moralism and we think of all the big ones, and culturally, socially, we think of all the big ones, murder. Some people get onto homosexuality, committing adultery. We think of these big name sins, but when you think about complaining, it's like it's the small one that gets washed under the rug.
I was thinking about this. It's kind of the perfect time to be having this discussion with the pandemic still at the forefront of everybody's thinking. It's funny because we keep trying to make plans to go do stuff, whether it's camping or trips, and like, oh no, we can't. Oh yeah, that's closed. Oh wait, we can't go there. Oh man, I can't. Oh yeah, we can't go to that restaurant right now. Or they're takeout only. We can't sit there and enjoy the water or eat food or whatever. And it's kind of just sort of a right, ever-present reminder of this reality, because as I face all the, I can't do that, I least not right now, then all the stuff that's on the right is what seems to be sort of
Coming alive. at the
well,
moment.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly, coming alive, and I think that's sort of the case in everyone, like as demonstrated by like the riots and all the conflict in cities and various people wrestling through this stuff. So it's just an interesting time to be having this discussion and kind of.
Actually, I mean, thanks for that, because I didn't really think of it in that dynamic. I was just kind of thinking of me and my own little life over here, like a hermit. But you're right. Yeah, actually, yeah, it does fit with what's going on. Romans 1. Where's it going? Oh, yeah. So you have dissatisfaction. And, of course, that dissatisfaction, as in Romans, is directed first and foremost to God. So when you're dissatisfied here, another thing I want to point out with the Romans 1 is it says, although they knew God, they didn't honor him. So now we have this idea of belief where on one end, they know it's there, the information is there. On the other end, the desire is not behind it. Their desire is dissatisfied with what God has, and their desire is for something else, which gives them the belief that they deserve it, gives them the belief that they should have it. And then from there comes all mannerisms and manifestations of evil thereafter. I think I'll also put so worldview as it relates to belief. We'll do behaviors, which is same as action. And from this, what did I say? Experience. And more particularly the love and hate experience. Just to give an example of this, atheism, Christianity, that whole argument, not that I want to get into it, but from an atheist perspective, science is on their side. They have reasoning, they have data, they have these scientific proofs. And on the Christian side, they argue that they have their own proofs, and they're all building up, again, in the intellectual sphere, this case for what they believe in. And of course, the actions that follow. But I want to draw attention to that these beliefs on, in some ways, both sides, both of which come from their desires, both of which comes from what they want. In terms of science, the very interpretation of the data is corrupted by their wants. In the same way as Christian could also approach data and have a corrupted view based on what they want. And so just to kind of help further the scope of how this dynamic works, that's the only reason why I wanted to include that in, to say that this isn't just like little steps in your day-by-day life. This is also on the larger scale. I mean, it's wherever you go, you're bringing with you something that's fueling your ideas, that's fueling what you do. Okay, so dissatisfaction. Also, these desires are in conflict with God. So when you get to Romans 8, actually I'll read that one. Romans 8, 5, start at verse 5. For those who are according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who are according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For the mind set on the flesh is death, but the mind set on the Spirit is life, because the mind set on the flesh is hostile towards God, for it does not subject itself to the law of God, for it is not even able to do so. And those who are in the flesh cannot please God. Okay, so we're just pursuing these things. These are our desires, and we build some kind of case or justification for those desires, and then from that justification we act. As I get to Romans 8, as it's showing, we are in the Spirit, and as we are preoccupying ourselves with these things, we are already at enmity with God, just in that pursuit, let alone our status, condition, let alone the behaviors, everything. Jesus talks about the morality of, it's not just doing the act, but it's even just thinking on it. again, it comes back to desire. So, our pursuit to these things, we're building a kingdom. That is, this whole sphere is going to become a kingdom. What does a kingdom look like? Castle? Yeah. Sure. Okay, so we're building a kingdom. This kingdom is actually set up against God. Everything that we're going after to build this kingdom is set up against God.
Or is that one comment on that? Like that's what Hebrews, where it says, without faith it's impossible to please him. I mean, that enmity comes from the fact that we don't believe God, right? So like what you're describing down on the left, like I believe I'm the center of the universe and that God revolves around me,
Right.
and everybody should do what I want and all things should fall into place according to what I desire. And therefore I don't believe God. I don't believe what he says. I don't believe that he's central. And I don't believe that he's what's best for me. And I think that's the mentality that's the problem. That's the problem that creates the enmity. Right?
Yeah, so even, like what Jeff will say in Adam and Eve, in the case of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, this is not a tree that they just suddenly knew about evil. This is a tree that it's now up to us to decide what is good and what is bad. So you're talking about faith in the sense of believing, in the promises of God, and is that good for me? Well, already, before you even got to that point of deciding whether it's good for you, you've already set yourself up. You already know what's good for you in an autonomous sense of sort of way. You already decided what was good for you back with your desires. The whole Jesus-God dynamic doesn't quite fit the way you like it to, so you're going to manipulate a little bit of what you believe to fit this narrative and then act on it. Okay. Interestingly enough, just a minor note, so Romans 6:16, the idea that we're slaves to sin. This is actually only just one page away from there. Okay, so on top of not having glasses, I scribble in here, and now I can't find the verse because of that. Okay, so do you not know that when you present yourselves to someone as slaves for obedience, you are a slave. You are slaves of the one who you obey, either of sin resulting in death or of obedience resulting in righteousness. So again, he's saying that if you're committed to something, that commitment enslaves you. So this building of a castle, you're not a slave to your own castle. The idea of, again, back with Romans 8, where it's talking about the enmity with God, the whole thought of pleasing God in any kind of behavioral sense is long gone because you're way too preoccupied with this. And I'll even add to that. Let's make one of these righteousness. The pursuit of righteousness. It sounds very noble. In a Christian circle, it sounds, you get the double thumbs up. Everything. This is your priority in building your kingdom if you call yourself a Christian. And you don't have to. You can be an atheist and still have some pursuit of goodness, kindness, lovingness, whatever you want to call it. But especially in Christian circles, you see this. This is like a priority. This is because your life depends on it, or your self-image depends on it. So you're building this kingdom, and part of that's righteousness. And yet, you can go through the whole action and behavior that is very similar to what God calls us to, and yet completely miss everything because this pursuit was, as Romans says, filthy rags. It's also not seeking after God. This is you just trying to build your kingdom. You're praying to God to make you a better person. But back to even in James 4, this prayer to God to make you a better person is just fueled by the greed of your own life. There's something more to this praying to be a good person because you believe something, that God can help you with that, which is true, but still behind all that is the desire that says, I want to be a better person because I say so, for me. Okay, I'm going to get into kingdom talk. Anyone who knows me or been talking with me deeply lately, I'm just always going to kingdom talk. It's my go-to. I apologize, but not really. In Matthew 6:33, Jesus says, "Seek first the kingdom." So, in contrast, we seek our kingdom. Jesus comes in and says, "Seek first the kingdom." To put this in context, I'm not going to turn there. He's talking about the Gentiles even, and just how they are wanting to know when they're going to eat next, wanting to know if they're going to have enough clothes. And these are very, especially in comparison to what we go after, these are very justifiable things in terms of you need these. But Jesus, even with that, says, don't worry about that. Seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be given to you or added to you. When I think of seek, I think of pursuit. When I'm thinking of seek and pursuit, I'm actually thinking on this level, not necessarily these levels. That when God calls us to seek, he's not saying go run around looking for it, figuratively or otherwise. He is talking about from the deepest desire of your heart. When I think of God talking about, this is the Shema, where he says, when you love the Lord your God with your all in all, he's trying to speak to the desires of our innermost being, not just doing all these ceremonial, ritual, behavioral stuff. Okay. He also says, later, Jesus, the kingdom is like a treasure in the field. And so what happens? This guy, he finds it, he hides it, and then he goes and sells everything he has to buy this land so that he can get it. And there's that accompanying joy in finding this. Again, I'm saying it's going to this level. That's why he did it. That's why he sold everything. That's why he bought the property. That's behavior action. Why? Because of something back here. And since I'm on kingdom talk, the folly in this, our little K kingdom. Daniel 2, with that dream of the statue with the 4 different materials, or 5 different materials, to me it just summarizes the best, in terms of consolidation, just taking one verse and like, here's what I'm trying to say. I feel like it summarizes it the best. Because you have the statue, Daniel's interpreting it and saying there's these different levels, each representing a different kingdom or different empire. One trying to be better than the next, trying to be better than the next, taking over. At the end of that, he says a rock is going to come down and smash it at its feet. It's going to topple over and shatter into dust. And then the wind is going to, actually the wind carried them away, and not a trace could be found. The reason why this is powerful to me is because while we're in our pursuits to this low-K kingdom, everything that we desire to build this kingdom, God's saying in the very end, all this is just going to be forgotten. The traces of it are not going to be there. You're not going to see any evidence that this ever existed. So when we look at our low-K kingdom, and we're trying desperately to grab onto these little things in front of us, it's with this mindset, in terms of understanding, that these things are what matter. But then when you think about it, towards the end, when everything's said and done, like what are these things going to be worth? Okay, so fun, just a curious fun question, I guess. So if someone were to come, if you were given a week, so 7 days to live, what would you do? What are you going to do in those 7 days? Takers?
That's tough. That's the perfect length of a Mexico all-inclusive vacation.
And that's what I did. I did purposely for enough time for vacation.
Maybe That's hard. That's
Okay, so now let's go down to just 10 minutes. You now have 10 minutes left and then they're going to pull the plug. Now what do you do?
I think I did the same thing I do that week, was just sit with my family.
Oh, just, another day.
Just sit with them and talk.
And
They probably won't want me to talk. They talk too much.
I guess the reason why I brought these questions up is because in this whole dynamic of what we want, what we're trying to do, that sense of an ending to it, all of a sudden scrambles to you think, okay, wait, what's most important? Or what really matters? Or what difference is the stuff I'm pursuing really going to have? No one, I shouldn't say no one. In the next 10 minutes, I don't think people are just going to jump up and try to go shopping for all those things that they want. Usually, for most people, that's not even a priority. Why? Because then when they pass, none of that's going to matter. Automatically they get into that mindset of, well, what matters? And what I'm trying to say when I bring this to Daniel is everything, big or small, that we're trying to build up doesn't matter. One more is more noble is where families try to build something for their kids. And they pass it on. That way they just build it for nothing. It's going to go and last beyond them because it's going to be inherited by their children. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like trying to crush that belief. I mean, I'm doing it. So, but at the same time, in a grand scope of what God's doing, I mean, does it really, really matter? In our pursuit for righteousness, and I mean this from the selfish pursuit, does it really matter? Well, actually, no, because God took care of that. If God takes care of this, then what's that sense of urgency that if we don't have this, we're going to be depressed, or maybe we're just going to be doing one of these, or if someone's challenging our sense of righteousness, then we're going to fight them. I mean, what, in terms of a selfish pursuit of these, when we don't have it, these are our behaviors. But when that value of, wow, this is not what my life's based on anymore, you've disarmed all of this by changing your perspective of this. Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so there's the futility of our pursuits to build our own kingdom. When it comes to trying to grasp at these straws, I think this relates to what Don's been preaching, which is through Ecclesiastes that everything is hevel or smoke or vapor. And I like that better than vanity, and I'm glad he brought that up, because when we think of vanity, we're thinking, oh, it's just self, which is kind of what I'm saying here, but that's not the full weight of what the word is. The full weight is that smoke. You grasp at it and it's gone. It's like the meaning of it is just vanished. Even if you were to get what you want, you become dissatisfied with it. It doesn't last. There's nothing that you can grab onto that suddenly gives you that happiness that will last forever. So I do appreciate that perspective of hevel or smoke or vapor, in that all these pursuits, I mean, what are you really grabbing? It's nothingness. And so when it comes to the conclusion, just fear God, it's like that's it. That's everything. Because God is from beginning to end. Everything we're doing is that little in-between space of existence.
I think I would say, I would maybe back up and go, it doesn't not matter. I mean, it does matter. I mean, eating food matters. Taking a shower matters.
True.
Hygiene matters. Like simple things like that. They matter in a sort of a down here sense. Working a job, providing for your family, those things do matter. They're just dwarfed in comparison. They don't last. It doesn't mean that they don't altogether not matter, and I don't think that's what Solomon was after either. But I think he was trying to paint the picture of the overarching, here's what gives life. This is what will give you life. And because we seek life in those temporary things most often that don't last. So he's pointing us to God's life and our hope in him, that satisfaction will last. So in one sense, it's a vapor in the wind. However, the breath that you breathe and whatever that vapor is matters to you in that moment, right? But it's not the lasting matter.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, actually, I mean, it's kind of what my next point was, so you beat me to it. But yeah, just to add, I was going to talk about the purity of the truth. This is back to the Ephesians. There's that second half of Ephesians I sort of ignored until this moment. In terms of purity of truth, I'll say that last, putting on the new self in the likeness of God, created in righteousness and holiness of the truth. Or the other version I used was purity of the truth, which I liked a little better because, one, I started with that, and two, I started thinking about it from that lens. Purity is a word of single substance. That is, when something's pure, it's of a single substance. When you have a pure worship, your worship is singular, single-minded, single devotion. And so in terms of truth, the truth that God gives us, breaking through and exposing this whole dynamic, also reshapes it in the sense that God gives us a new heart. This new heart starts back here. We were just talking about the hardness of heart. Well, now, new self was what was here, but I'll say new heart. I said purity of truth. What did my other version say? Holiness of truth. I'll just say truth. And while it's not explicit in this very passage, he's going to eventually get onto it, tagging on these different things. I don't want to say good works. That kind of makes me cringe. Can I say good works without getting like tomatoes thrown at me? Okay. I'll just leave it blank. I'm too nervous. But you get the picture at least, that when God is speaking to us, he is speaking to us on the level of desire. He's speaking to us on the level of our pursuits to these things. He's speaking to us on a level that, yes, it translates into morality, but it is not directing morality in and of itself. So, when it gets back to all the mundane things, so just like you were saying, David, when it goes back to what I was saying was mundane, now it's a change of mind of those things. It is no longer that these things are so valuable that we just have to pour into them. Now it becomes something that we can engage with on a healthy level with a new mindset. There's the transformation of the mind. Again, this is Romans language, but it fits right in here. The new self, the new heart, again, the backbone for everything. And then, of course, translates into what Paul will eventually get into, hey, don't do this, don't do that, whatever. Even though I just said that way, I'm actually going to contradict myself here in saying that Christianity, truthfully, is not a matter of do's and don'ts, should and should nots. You don't come and say, my religion says I should do this and I should not do these things. Our religion, our faith, is based on what I want to do and what I don't want to do, which sounds so awful and deadly in Christian circles, but what do you want? That's really what it comes down to. If you have the heart and desire that's for God, that's what you want, and everything will follow suit. Assuming, of course, there's truth, which God gives us, because we have a new heart that desires it. What else? Oh, okay, so we are essentially now replacing our little K kingdom with God's big K kingdom. And God's kingdom, oh man, I'm going for it. I was trying to avoid this, but now I can't. So, God's kingdom, we'll say, starts at this point, right? The fall happens at this point. This fall inaugurates the small k kingdom. And the small k kingdom is going to go. Christ died and began a new kingdom. And this little k kingdom will reign until God judges evil, right? So back to these desires and how we're saying they're mundane or they're not really worth it. They're going to last to this point. After that, it's the whole imagery with the rock smashing the statue, and of course all the fragments are blown away without a trace in the wind. So we live in this in-between state where God has started this new kingdom, he's building it, and he is going to have it in full completion during this phase. Putting on this perspective, in light of everything else Jesus said, I would say has, especially for me, reshaped how I think through this dynamic, how I think about the little things that I pursue. I'm not saying it worked like perfectly or anything, but when I think about and I catch myself in the moment of pursuing these things, and I catch myself the check engine light coming on, that all these things are popping up, I'm thinking back like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then I realize I'm pursuing something that really I put way too much value in. And when you come back in light of everything here, that desire for these things that I'm pursuing, I've disarmed by looking at the bigger picture. Like, wait a minute, what am I doing? What do I want out of this? What's the outcome I want? And do I really want that outcome? And does it really matter if I get that outcome? And I'm asking myself these questions on this intellectual level, disarming myself to all these pursuits. And I'm realizing that at the end of the day, I mean, this is what matters. Now, even back to what David was saying, the importance of reshaping these little things. What is God's kingdom? God's kingdom is not made of stuff. God says he's going to build a new kingdom, a temple, everything. And I'm convinced that this new kingdom is people. It's made of people. And these people, God reached out into the world to save, to grab, so that he can be with them for eternity. So this new kingdom really is God wanting to be with his people. And so we get to the what matters. For me, it's these people that God is investing so much into. He bought them with his son, cost the life of Jesus to get these people. And yet I'm going around thinking about myself and not even caring about these people that God saved. I mean, just kind of put your mind around that. I'm over here trying to build my little kingdom. Actually, this is fun. Jeff did this one for me. So, I'm over here trying to pursue my kingdom. And there's all these people over here that are getting in the way of this. And now back to all this, that's the result I'm giving these other people for stepping in the way of me trying to pursue my desires. And yet, God's kingdom, it's not this, it's this. No irony there. The very thing that God is trying to save, we are trying to destroy. The very thing God's saying he's going to destroy, we're trying to save.
You know, for me, where that like this really, because I would tend to think of this in terms of either pursuits we shouldn't be going after or just physical things. But when Jeff shared your little diagram with me, in the context of ministry and having like a goal for a church and for more people or for this thing to be going on. And we do the same thing, which seems even worse in the context of ministry where we would like this right of righteousness piece,
Oh, yeah.
you're trying to do something you think is good and are actually using people to accomplish what you think needs to happen.
Yeah.
We do that in good versus that's what really stinks out to them. We do this even with good pursuit, things that you would think are good, but we still do this.
It's a true story on this one. I know I've done it, I know someone I've seen it, but now that I've done it, I'm seeing everyone else do it. They go on and they offer all this help in the most humbling manner. They're being the best help they can. But once they start seeing that you're not grateful for what they're doing, and you're not acknowledging their goodness, they start turning away like, this person is just some greedy person. I'm not helping them. Do you imagine that? We just took something that we're pursuing. We honestly think we're in that humbling status of helping and being loving or kind to them. And yet when they don't give us what we actually want, we talk bad about them. Just around.
Which is it could be as simple as just acknowledge that you've done something for them.
Yeah, something, anything.
Just acknowledgement, you don't get that.
No, anything. And that pretty much is my concluding point right there. 10 minutes, maybe more. So if there's anything, comments, questions, Rotten Tomatoes that David probably went downstairs to get, I mean, go for it.
I think just the last part about how we are in treating people, and if they're not grateful enough, we don't want to help them. It just reveals our kingdom, just such a strong contrast to Christ, and how we come to Him in all of those ways, just that He forgives us, that He loves us, that He takes us back. And just the amazing contrast of seeing all the failure of the kingdom we're trying to build, and just how completely different Christ is in His treatment of us.
I was actually imagining it because this is what we do. This whole dynamic of the love-hate experience. And yet God is still investing in us. I think of,
I was just gonna say, it's interesting that it just occurred to me now, I thought of it this way before, but God and us actually share the same pursuit. And just raw fallen man, like his pursuit is us, our pursuit is us.
Actually,
Also,
The problem is our pursuit is not him.
interesting, yeah. That's a fun way to think about it, actually. Yeah, see, we're trying to pursue, and it goes back to the garden, like what we think is good and bad. We pursue for us what we think is good, but God pursues us for what He said was good. And it's a whole different mindset.
It comes back to your belief, what we form as our belief, and it's based on our desires.
Yep. Yeah, if that's everything, like I said, I mean, I'm surprised I stopped short. I honestly thought it was going to go on for another hour, and just not worry about sending the main service. But actually, I got to that pretty quickly. I probably skipped something. I'll go home and be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. But
Yeah, that's my time you're talking about there. I was just about to say, hey, I'll take your 10 minutes. So it's a joke. Just a joke.
yeah, okay, cool. Well, like I said, if there's no more questions, I'm gonna be checking my kids. So we good. You want something?
All right.
I can do that. Do that. Dear God, thank you for everything you've given us, your Son, your pursuit in our lives, your interest to break down everything we've built so that you can show us something more grand, more glorious than anything we could ever fathom or build with our own hands. We pray that you will understand and aid us in our struggle as we fight in this in-between state where one end we believe, but we need help with our belief. We want to desire you, but we know we still go back to the fleshly things we do. We know that you transform us. We know that you're there to show us what truth is, and exposing just how silly we really are pursuing nothing, and nothing valuable in comparison to what you have to offer. So we pray that you'll keep guiding us to yourself, and that you'll bring us to the full understanding according to your truth. Amen.